It was a bit of a trial and error approach. We were trying to make the city more understandable and more welcoming for every category of people. Why? Because inclusion is the basis for development of every healthy society. It's not just about disabled people. It is about making our world cleaner, more comfortable, more understandable for everyone. Because today we talk about disabled people, right? Tomorrow we'll overlook or forget mothers with prams. The day after tomorrow we'll forget about the elder people, and we end up with living in a Sparta. So I'd like to ask you about what objectives did you set in front of yourself, and what kind of transformations happened as the result of your projects? Probably we can emulate your experience. So.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this extraordinary event in Moscow. I'm very grateful, therefore. And shortly, I want to show you some pictures and explaining, meanwhile, what I'm doing. I'm a social entrepreneur, and I got the idea about 20 years ago to have professional events for disabled persons, because we have now here a business forum. And what I'm doing worldwide is really to have social forums, but not for the professionals and not for the civil service providers, but for the people themselves. And therefore, I organized about 25 big, huge events in different regions of the world. That means mostly in Latin America, all over Europe, always in the big cities like Brussels. Here you see a photo about 5 weeks ago in Belgrade, the 7th European Congress, and Berlin, Prague. And the goal is to give persons in need of special care the occasion to come together, to meet, to encounter, to exchange about the situation. How do I live? What is my situation? How can I improve that? So first of all, the impact is like a trial to implement the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and to empower the people themselves to get out of their curtains, let's say institutions or families, to come in the big cities, meet and exchange, but also to have an impact on the politics, on the NGOs and so on. And beside of Europe, I was trying to spread out this idea in the whole world, and it's interesting where it resulted. Now we are in Brazil, nearby Sao Paulo, and there 9 years ago, for the very first time, there was a small congress, and we put out very, very so-called poor persons out of the favelas to bring them to the congress. And from that moment on, they meet each other every month, one day, monthly in Sao Paulo, which means really something. They disable themselves and exchange about everything what is important for them. You have a very updated version of a smartphone. You are talking about technique, but it works also in another way. Communication is possible for each of us by different means. This is Colombia. Another congress happened there. Another region where a lot of things are going on is Asia, Thailand. We had already now 4 big congresses in Bangkok and nearby. And there as well, the disabled, mostly I have to say, so-called mentally challenged persons are coming together, and they discuss and really try to improve their situation and to convince their parents and their co-workers and so on. Thailand. But also in very special places like Tajikistan, Dushanbe. There were persons coming with a wheelchair, 10, 12 hours journey, and afterwards nearly their wheelchairs broke because of the quality of the material. And there happened half a year ago the first Congress, and after this Congress, Tajikistan ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and already now we are in a process to prepare the second Congress there. And now, beside of Asia, and there are a lot of other congresses in India and different places you can see on my website. But the most important event to me happened in Russia. 4 years of preparation after the first National Congress in Moscow in Ekaterinburg. We organized the first World Congress in Ekaterinburg exactly 9 months ago, more or less. And there, for the very first time, more than 700 disabled persons are coming together from all the continents with all kinds of disabilities. There were blind people from Nepal. There were Down syndromes from New Zealand. There were deaf people from Africa, from all over the world. And the organization was extremely good. It was a really good meeting and collaboration between me as a social entrepreneur, voluntary, with the local government, with NGOs. I have nowhere else experienced such a good collaboration. After these 4 years, we had this wonderful Congress, and up to now, in the whole 20 years, it was the most important thing. And we have also had a podiums discussion there, and we were exchanging people from different parts of the world. How do you live? What are the situations there? And how we can really empower ourselves and also show that we are not only disabled, but we are able and to have this paradigm shift from so-called disability towards ability, because most of those people are really, really able and skilled persons. Mainly outside they are physically disabled, but inside they have such a strength and a power and a good will and a good heart. It's amazing to get in touch with them in this background, why I'm doing that since more than 20 years. And maybe we can come to some questions later on. Maybe the time is over for the moment, I don't know.
Yeah, of course. But да, у меня есть вопрос.
Well, I do have questions, and let me just start right from the beginning. We do know about such a cultural phenomenon, which ghettoization, when we basically put, or we combine people according to a certain category where we put similar people in the same place. Do you think that this might be a bit of a problem, a point? I was listening to the translation, and it's quite astounding because people with special needs, but we translate and work with this topic completely differently than Europe. So that's why this issue of ghettoization is extremely urgent. Do you think that there is a way out, or is it a really big problem?
Right, it's always the same question I'm asked, because why I call those congresses for persons with disabilities, because I exclude them. But if I don't tell who is invited, the so-called parents, normal civil society is coming and they are neglected. So what I want to do is to give them the floor to express themselves and really tell what they can tell us. And there you will recognize very soon that, of course, all of them, they have a disability, and they feel excluded. But on the other side, they want to share, they want to give their contribution to the society. They want to live their normal life, probably in a sheltered way. They want to work. And I think if we do something like yes, you at the beginning you spoke about accessibility. accessibility of environments, but what we need also is accessibility in the human part, I mean in emotions through encounters, because a lot of persons have never encountered persons with disabilities, and that's the reason why a lot of people in the society are afraid on them, and so even feeling threatened. But in reality, we also need, and this is the most important thing, a mind shift, because so it's the overcoming of the obstacle in our own disability, to look on them only with reference to the disability. They have one side, but they have a lot to give. And so therefore, me personally, I don't like the word inclusion, because first, the concept is very good to include everybody. It's meant for all the vulnerable groups. But if you try to include somebody, you have first, at least with your mind, already excluded him. Anyhow, otherwise there is no sense to include him. So I think we have to see that all of us could be in the situation to be more or less disabled, getting older, getting ill or something. And officially the numbers are about 10% of the population has a kind of a diagnosis. But in reality, there are probably a lot of more, because where do you put the borders? Who's disabled or not? And I think, because I was a director also of a big institution for so-called I tell it so-called mentally challenged persons, and we didn't spoke at the beginning, if we had young volunteers, for example, to work in, what is the diagnosis? We said these are human beings, first of all. And afterwards, they have a specialty, like all of us, and so many people have a kind of diagnosis like ADHS or something like that, Ritalin, calm down. But I think the challenge of the future will be to accept that everybody of us is more or less anormal or normal. Maybe nowadays it's unnormal to be normal. And therefore, I would say that the most important thing is, it's like a call coming from those people, I have to tell them that they are there. Don't label me. Disability, ability, but don't label me. Take me serious as a human being, as an individuality, and give me as much support as I want to have, but not more, no overprotection. And then we will see how we can manage together, because also the people who are working with them, it's amazing what you can get back. It's a really mutual benefit. So I think those persons, all vulnerable groups, in that also drug abuse, also you can talk about that as well, they have a lot of strength because they overcame a lot of obstacles, difficulties, disabilities from outside. And with that strength and hope and optimism, positivism, I go through Berlin, I'm coming from Berlin, a lot of people totally depressed. And then you go to such an event, it's pure cure, afterwards. To meet such so-called Down syndrome people, it's amazing how heartily welcoming they are. And can you say they are disabled or not? Or am I disabled? Or who is disabled? And so in the future, I think we have much more to listen to them, to include them, sorry for the word, into all like professional services, civil services, universities, because I think they are the specialists.
Ну, давайте тогда отсюда, совершенно прекрасно, спасибо огромное.
That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you very much. And I think it leads us to an absolutely amazing project. And I really wanted you to know about it a bit more. Cecile Cartier, the president of Vinceras. What does Cecile do and what does her foundation do? Well, basically, this foundation puts together students and homeless persons. Am I correct? And is it correct? Is it right? So the foundation gives them an opportunity to enrich one another by different skills or competences. Soft skills, of course. So what is this new experience? How is that possible? How does it function? We know about Scandinavian projects when students live with the elderly, and this is clear, we understand that. But how is it even possible with people who do not have a permanent home, with homeless people who are viewed by the culture, by the society? It's a bit of a taboo subject. We try to ignore these people. We try to make sure that they don't exist. But you bring these people up to the surface. You say, here they are, let's work together. So what sort of experience is this? So what part do your volunteers play in this? How is it accepted by the society and by your students? Could you please tell us about it?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I will answer your questions immediately. I just wanted to say a lot of what I could have said was said by you, although this is a different group of persons that you are talking to or talking about or working with. Maybe I first have just to explain how we started with this Vinci-Rast. We are not international like you are. We are really focused on Vienna only. My little organization is situated in Vienna. I started 15 years ago. And I mean, to be invited here is one of the big surprises which have accompanied me in the last 15 years, because I never ever thought of founding something which will evolve and which will get so much attention as we do. I started, as I just said, 15 years ago, and my first idea was not so much helping homeless people. It was actually to get out of my being powerless, of being nearly paralyzed, of not being able to change something in this world, because I don't involve in politics, and I'm not someone who complains all the time. So I thought, what is the world I would like to live in? How do we deal with each other? What is the nature and the quality of relationship between people? And I am deeply convinced that if we had better relationships, we would have a better society, whatever better means. But I think we have an idea about it, especially in the world of today. And so this was what I was really interested in. And then by incident, which I don't want to go into now because it would take too much of a time, but I started with a shelter for homeless people. I thought, this is a good opportunity to found something where I personally can practice every day what does quality of relationship mean? How do we deal with people who we feel they don't belong to our society? We want them outside. We don't want to see them either because they speak differently, their culture is different, they clothe differently, their religion is different. So I don't know what it is like in Moscow, but anyway, I'm used in several countries and in Vienna especially. We want them as far away as possible. So I thought this is not so difficult. I'm no social worker. I had no experience. I have no professional learning for a social worker. And I started with this shelter for 50 people. Mostly we are 60. I say we are because until 2 months ago, I was spending practically always 2 nights in a week in this shelter. And with very few rules. Our main rules are no prejudice, don't judge them, no judgment, and don't expect anything. Don't wait for a result of what you're doing. And this is a big challenge for each of us. I also want to add that from the very beginning, it was clear to me that I won't get any money from the government because I'm no professional, so there was a lot of skepticism that this cannot ever work. Why do you think you can do that? I was convinced it's not so difficult. And so we only have volunteers, and only up to now we have a few paid persons. But at the beginning, the first 5 years, we had no paid collaborators. And we have only sponsorship money, which means we don't have to tell the state what we do with Steuergelder, with the taxes, yes. It's private sponsorship. And if I tell you, I mean, after 1 year, I got the telephone call from the main person who is in charge for homeless people in Vienna, who said, please don't ever start something like that. It is so difficult. Even our professionals have difficulties with this group of people who live in the street. And he called me and he said, we only hear positive things of what you're doing, so we want to support you, we want to give you some money. We talked to them, and after a few months we said, no, thank you, as long as we can afford with private money, we want to have the total responsibility, and we don't want to tell them whom we take. It was very unusual because in this emergency night shelter, couples would sleep in a bed. We accepted dogs. We accepted people from anywhere, no matter whether they were Austrians, men, women, where they came from, what their past was. We just said, as long as we have a bed, you're welcome. So it worked well. Now to come back to your question as quickly as I can, because now we have 7 little institutions, and it certainly is a very important aspect that our institutions are small, they are not big. We have practically no bureaucracy. We don't deal poverty. To me, one saying is to be poor is not so much having nothing, but being nobody. And this makes an essential difference. Every person, all of us, what we need is mutual relationship, nourishing relationship, not only digital relationships, and especially homeless people, of course. They have to live the essentials. They have to overcome everyday life, which is very often a pure fight. How can I deal with the resources which the state gives? There's also one thing which is important to me. Our state in Austria, we have a very, not perfect, never perfect, but a very good functioning social system. I think they can always do better and always do more, especially now where exclusion of refugees is a big topic. But what the state cannot do is to love. And I know this is quite a challenge, but this is what we human beings can which is our possibility. And whatever love includes, it's a very big item. This 7 different institutions, the one is a shelter, the second was that I got enough money to restore the house which we could buy at the very beginning. Homeless people, 29, can live there together. They learn solidarity, they learn how to be attentive to the other. The third institution was an apartment for 6 persons who are very ill addicted to alcohol and who decide to live with each other without control from outside. Unbelievable that really after 10 years, 99% of them not only have reduced alcohol, but have completely stopped. This means community healing is a question of living in a community. And this project was then the next one. In 2013, we opened another house very close to the center, again with the sponsorship of an entrepreneur who knew us and who saw that we work seriously. And there we have students living, working, learning together with previous homeless people. They live together in little apartments, male, female, always either two previous homeless with one student or two students with one previous homeless. Of course, we offer a lot of possibilities in this house, which is very close to the center, which is in a district, a very bourgeois district, so not at all something where you expect homeless people to live. And we have a restaurant, we have 3 workshops, carpenter, repairing bicycles, and the third one is sewing. We have cinema once in a month, and so on.
Yeah.
And this is not all. There is another 2 little organizations.
Yeah, but we have...
I know, this is too much. Sorry.
Yeah, but у меня прям очень короткий вопрос.
I have a very brief question, and I'd like you to answer briefly. In Russia, in Moscow, we have an outstanding charity person, Lisa Glinka, and she had a carrying service for homeless people by one of our railway stations and subway stations. And city dwellers tended to avoid this place because it was stinking and there was a lot of homeless people crowded there. Can you tell me, do normal people, tend to avoid places where homeless people are placed in Vienna, or it has become an integral part of the city environment? So here we have homeless people, here we have a carpentry for homeless people, here where they are living.
There is no, well, there are certain places where the homeless gather because they are attended, they get meals, or there's the questions of social attendance is answered. But we have them everywhere. They are sitting in all corners and streets. In Vienna, it is not so much an item. In Salzburg, it was very, very strong, but it's a very touristic place. Of course, many people try to avoid them, but what gives a lot of joy for us, which is so rewarding, is that we realize how uncomplicated it is, how natural, if you accept them as they are, if you don't wait for anything specially, if they're just human beings and you don't wait for success. Success is a word which we just avoid. And it means freedom. It means not only for them, I don't know if they wouldn't call it freedom, but they learn slowly to live in the community, what it means to be attentive to the other and to be accepted, to be recognized, to be just one of all, and they are still, they cannot function, but they feel accepted.
Okay, thank you. Daria Alekseeva, спасибо большое.
And Daria Alekseeva, thank you so much. Daria Alekseeva from Charity Shop. I have a feeling that everyone uses Charity Shop. At least you can hardly find somebody who hasn't heard about it. It was a private initiative which has become part of our mundane life. So let's say, well, there are things which we don't wear any longer. We have visited all the possible swap parties, but we still have those garments which we don't wear. And charity shop helps us because we bring those things that we no longer wear to the charity shop and they use it. It's a great initiative on one hand. On the other hand, it is clear that it is changing the city environment. We become more conscious about consuming products. We become less consumeristic. And we become a little bit changed ourselves thanks to this project. So I wanted to ask you a question. And I think that charity shop project had a profound effect upon the city. So tell us, where did this project, where did the idea for the project come from, and what have you achieved? Hello, my name is Daria, and Charity Shop has started as a small-time initiative. So we got together with our friends, and I asked them to donate those garments which they could still be worn, and we have sold these garments for 134,000 rubles within 4 hours, and we invested 5,000 rubles into buying some snacks. So MVP was really great. So, and then I looked at these 134,000 rubles as a revenue and realized that it's enough money to rent some space in Moscow and convert it into an offline project. If we do it once a month and we earn this money, and then we can pay for the rent and spend the remaining money on charity projects. But then we had to confront the reality. We could hardly pay for the rent, and we had to spend our own money. But the project was gaining traction. Now we're operating in 11 cities. We have more than 100 points, drop-off points where you can drop your garments. And so we also travel around cities and around offices. For example, we come to Google's office and they give us those things which they no longer need, and we dispose of these things the way we see fit in line with our rules. Also, the original concept of the project changed. We wanted to have some vintage shop for girls where you could walk into and buy something, a branded product at a fairly low price, like Calvin Klein for 3,000 rubles, not for 15,000 rubles. It's a bargain for Calvin Klein. However, 97% of garments which we got were mass market garments or out-of-date garments. So the original concept was about selling high-quality projects and use the revenue and the margin for the charity project. So that had to be changed. Now we are mostly taking clothes for processing. So we had to find companies who were able to pick this up and process. But they were not ready to work with secondhand. Before, those companies were focusing on processing fabric waste from, let's say, textile producers. However, they didn't know what to do with the second-hand clothes because there are buttons, there are plastic elements, and all sorts of other things. Finally, we found a solution provider, but it was not a satisfactory one. So we had to start doing it ourselves. We have acquired necessary equipment, and we are producing products. We are producing products for furniture producers, like Swedish furniture producers, for example. So we want to have a closed cycle. So you donate your clothes to us. You drop it off in the mall. Then we process these clothes and we convert it into products which will be then used by furniture producers. On average, we tend to throw away 36 kilos of clothes annually. And if we calculate the entire amount of textile which ended up in the landfills, and if we divide it by the number of people in Moscow, that's 36 kilos per year per person, or 450,000 tons a year. We are collecting just 250. This year we're planning to collect 600. Okay, 600 against 250,000, or quarter of a million. We've got 100,000 people in Moscow who give us their clothes, but there are 15 million people in Moscow. So we are looking at the entire industry of waste collection, and this is the problem. We don't have collection or drop-off points or collection points. This is why we have to agree with companies which let us put containers. Our recent success was the agreement with Azbuk of Kusas. This is a famous retailer in Moscow, so they will put our drop-off containers for these garments. What we want to have is an agreement with city authorities for these collection containers to be positioned randomly in the city so that you could just put your clothes in it. But that needs to be resolved on the municipal level. In our case, this is fairly difficult because you cannot put it next to school, because for safety concerns you cannot have it next door to a medical institution or next very close to the subway station. So the question is where we can put them. You can't put them right. You cannot put them right in the middle of the street. But we are trying to get around it somehow, so we are getting in touch with the municipal authorities. But for this project to become a fully fledged city project, we need to expand. Talking about conscious city, are city dwellers asking for such containers to be installed? Very frequently we are getting these requests, and after a swap party, people tend to bring, let's say, a lot of clothes to us, so that our drop-off points become completely stuffed. Like it was free yesterday, now it is full, and that creates a logistics problem for us. And also, we are bringing these boxes from Germany simply because it was impossible to get this box manufactured in Russia. So people don't really understand how much effort goes into getting this thing approved. So when people say, "Please put it in the yard in my yard or my backyard," it is very difficult. However, for those city dwellers which want to become activists and they want to collect garments themselves, we're working closer with them. You can get yourself registered, and it doesn't actually matter whether it is a group of people or a school or a group of or a small business. You can collect these garments and collect clothes and donate to us. In some cases, we just have to collect 50 kilos of clothes somewhere in Krasnogorsk, which may be a problem because it takes half a day to get there. But in some other cases, 500 kilos or half a ton collected by or 1.5 tons collected by a pregnant girl, which was trying to find some work for herself while staying at home. So collecting this out-of-fashion clothes is an easy way to help other people, because we take these things anyway in any condition. So a lot of people participate. So pregnant people and pregnant women and women in maternity leave, they tend to be most active. So Dmitry Ioffe, clean games. I understand that it is easier with clothes and garments. So there is a gamification element to this. However, in your case, you have a more complex project, clean games. So with the people clean the streets, So it's not about going for a barbecue party and collecting all the waste that you don't want to leave on site. Tell us about your project. Tell us, how do you get people interested in this? Because we have some subotnik parties, but actually there are better ways of spending time rather than collecting litter around the city. So what was the maximum number of people you, let's say, had in one of your events? My name is Dmitry Ioffe, and I'm the head of the Clean Games project. And it's a game on collecting litter and sorting litter. And we have this litter collecting events. We have been doing this for 4 years now. But it's a small format event for 100 or 200 people. Normally we have from 50 to 250. 250 is the number we would like to have mostly. So it takes four hours, and the game itself takes from 1 to 2 hours. So we split all these people into teams. That can be done either beforehand or right there in the beginning. Each team is 4 people, so you need to win, and so they collect litter. You score a number of points for a bag of litter. But if you collect a bag of glass or a bag of plastic waste, then you get more points. So that because you have sorted this litter, and that makes it easier to process the collected waste. So that's the key idea of the project. You get the points. These points then form your rating. And these points can be traded. So you can buy, let's say, tools, for example. You can get yourself a cart for 5 points and enhance your competitive edge in the game, because with a cart you can transport more litter. So that game was not invented by environmentalists. It was invented by people whose business was role playing. And we decided to invent a game in which litter or waste will play the role of gold. And it was not a very good idea. We decided to simplify that game, and we decided to add a sporting element to it. And so gamification is about competing. So it's not just about doing something, it's about doing something better than somebody else. And that's how it worked out. So we have prepared methodological guidelines. We have called it a non-commercial franchise, and we started to roll it out in other cities of Russia. Now we have 92 towns and cities across Russia where this initiative takes place. So this year we'll go above 1,000. Do you get the let's say grapevine advertisement? In other words, how do people tend to find out about your project? The key challenge is to get let's say people do this, because no one likes to collect litter. So you may have 5, 10, or 15 enthusiasts and actively minded people, but what you need to have is 100 or 150, so that you can have a sponsorship element there, so that it could be financed by externally by sponsors and become more sustainable. And so we have guidelines to do this. So this model is most sustainable in a corporate segment. This is when we sell this to the company. Let's say they pay us for the organization. We organize this event for them, and their people collect waste. but we do have this non-commercial methodology for these clean games. Now we have similar concepts of clean games in Nigeria, India, and as well as in a number of other countries. Okay, thank you so much. And I'd love to listen to you all, and we indeed are a bit pressed for time. Lisa Savin, a curator and an art critic and a co-founder of Sparta Foundation. Lisa has a very challenging project, I would say, the project in the area of culture. The culture, so this is something which changes us. So Lisa, could you please tell us more about what you do? I'll be fairly brief. The project which I'm about to tell you is traces its origin back to the Dmitry's project. We are collecting spent tires, and we were listening to these stories about the clean games, and the spent tires. They have the fourth level of hazard, which is strange, but anyway. Culture is about advertising touch points. We have an opportunity to focus people on particular activity, which may be quite challenging. People don't want to focus this over the course of their routine life. So our foundation is fairly young, and our first project was a different one. But first I wanted to tell you about this. There is a large Gamma festival.
It's called Gamma Festival, so there it's an art festival, especially about recycling art. So I was trying to look for certain funding, and basically then people ask me, well, do you want to do something about our used tires? So we started, we launched this project, but what basically do we face when we start working with tires as, artful object? Of course, there were different, swans or flower beds or tire swings, So we decided, well, since we are from St. Petersburg, and, St. Petersburg, when it comes to adopting any initiatives, it's a very conservative city. It's really hard to get anything through. So we decided to, proceed with architectural invasions, not to basically irritate the people. So we're going to use the west facade of the Manege building. So we're going to build a recycle shop. This is a column. The tires are old. It's hard to basically join them together. I think probably I was damned by everybody, by the cultural council, by the workers, by, all of the administrators of St. Petersburg. So basically what we have here, so around this square, there'll be the columns by Sergei Tatran. So basically, he's reading Aberut poetry, who were Russian futurists. So he's reading this futuristic poetry, and the tires are spinning. We're talking about recycling, culture, singing, dancing, selling the tickets. So that was the project that will be installed during Gamma Festival, which will be held this weekend. So Pavel is a student from an architectural school. So basically, he's installing this thing, which I hope will be a functioning amphitheater, and it will be something that will organize the space, because the festival is held in the former beer factory. So basically, this is a company who collects tires for Gazprom. They brought us 500 tires. We demanded more. They brought us 1,000 tires. Now we want 2,000. But look at us. We're building. So that's what we do with the tires. That's as of yesterday. Basically, you see, that's what we put together yesterday. We want to call it the Church of the Centaur, but we are a bit cautious about this. We're cautious from the official reaction. So the second project is something that we're launching in Siberia, in Novosibirsk. That project, basically, the idea generated from last year's Moscow Urban Forum. came to St. Petersburg, and I realized that we need a platform for debate, because again, sometimes it's hard for us to make the population accept something. People usually treat it as something that is being rammed down their throat from the top. So we decided to launch this project together with Gazprom Neft. This is a smart turbo platform. We thought it would be like a Tinder for business or startup accelerator. Well, basically what it's about is that we're trying to collect grassroots initiatives from what's happening around. So in my ideal picture of the world, people are full of ideas. They want to carry them forward, but sometimes they don't have enough money or administrative support. I myself know that sometimes administrative support is something that is needed. So what we're doing now, we're developing a prototype of this platform. We will launch it in about a month in Siberia, in Novosibirsk, because we have a bit more support from the administration. So we are inviting startups to participate there. So this is what we're showing you. These are the results of our research while we were just preparing the project. So we have programmers, we have web developers, who all of a sudden have interesting ideas that they're not realizing straight away, but we think that we should give them a chance. 5 years ago, I started talking about, new types of playgrounds. I hated this, the fact that we have the Kremlin, built on playgrounds. I think it would be wonderful to have a new concept, not just a model of the Kremlin for children to play around. So I think if we launch it around Russian cities, we can actually achieve a wonderful effect that was achieved by Carlo Rossi when he started developing Russian provincial cities. We also have a program how to direct mass transit flows. We will test drive it in Novosibirsk. This is an urban neural network that can react to emergency situations or can detect them in advance. And so we are also working on creating a huge database on different construction projects and real estate development projects. Sometimes, we do not actually know our laws, and we get stuck at the first level of getting administrative approval. So, of course, we're going to promote our startup companies. We will provide them support. So we have an expert council, we have a supervision council, we have, of course, 4 different directions. Culture is my pet subject, but it does not just come out of a vacuum. We have to look at the environment. This is something that's important for us, and we gained a lot of support when we were starting this Church of the Saint Tyre. When I showed the first prototypes, we actually garnered a lot of support from NGOs such as Delovaya Russia and Russlom.com and so on. So we got a lot of correspondence, and that allowed us to actually jump through all of the bureaucratic hoops. We will have a voting procedure on the website. We will have an online review. This is the structure. When we basically invite interesting startups, we have a peer council which looks at what's really needed. Well, sometimes, entrepreneurs think that they need $1 million, where in reality all they need is basically a couple of official approvals and about $3,000. So what's important for us is basically this Native Cities project, because the project Native Cities supports local initiatives, but our platform, I do hope that will expand to cover all of Russia. There is SOSA, the Israeli accelerator. So how does it work? A business comes, donates 100,000 euros, dollars, shekels, whatever, and then you can show 25 startups. I realize that in Russia there is a lot of inertia, so that we will just show one startup, it will generate 24 new startups. So right now we're collecting these ideas, the startups, so we are quite hopeful. We are quite hopeful. We do hope that will become an accelerator. This is my dream. We started talking about Berlin, and I work quite a lot in Berlin, and a lot of our environmental initiatives basically came out of these conscious, hangouts in Berlin. I really like that. So you give people an opportunity to cast a vote. When we talk about high-tech entrepreneurship in Russia, people don't really know a lot about what's going on in the world, what kind of new projects exist, and so on. Right now, I would like to ask Darren Ho. I think he will be our last speaker for today, but we just have to tell you about this project. We heard about different initiatives, cultural initiatives, the charity shop, and smart city, providing help to the homeless, changing the environment, making it more accessible. But what's happening in Singapore is actually absolutely breathtaking. Singapore is a tiny island nation. We all know and we all have heard about the Singapore miracle, but what is truly miraculous for me is their Green City program. I think that there is nothing quite as fascinating. I think that Singapore is a truly advanced and forward-looking city. They made the city extremely green, and they actually turned our perception of agriculture upside down. But city farming is something that functions within the city. It gentrifies all of the space by implementing agricultural initiatives, and it changes the way that the city looks. So Darren, over to you. I would like to hear about your experience.
Yeah. Greg.
So thank you. That was very kind to share about Singapore. So we have a farm in Singapore. The reason why we wanted to start a farm, an urban farm in Singapore, is because Singapore is, as you know, is a very green city, but I feel that the trees or the plants, they're not meaningful enough, So they're just there because it's beautiful or because it looks good. But we realized that because we're trying to solve a problem in Singapore where there's a very big disconnect to nature and food, right? Because I think like Moscow and Russia, Singapore imports 90% of our food from all over the world. So it's a lot of food that we take. So most of most of the Singaporeans, they take food for granted. So that's one. And that's why we wanted to start an urban farm, is to reconnect the food with the people again. So to bring value to food. Then the second problem that we see is the problem of inclusivity, right? The word that you mentioned. In a very fast-paced city lifestyle, we tend to forget the old people, the ex-convicts, the disabled people, the homeless, and all that. And in a city, it's very convenient to forget that. So we want to have a space, and we realize that having an urban farm brings everybody together because we talk about food, we talk about growing, gardening, how to cook the herbs to use, all the vegetables to use. And that's why the concept allowed us to bring everybody together again. And then the third problem is actually with waste, but it's not so much your type of waste, is food waste. I know it's very disappointing that Singapore, our culture is a very unsustainable culture. So we want to educate people about waste, and how we do that in the farm as well is because we farm insects, and insects have the capacity to eat food waste, and then you turn the food waste into compost or into protein. So it's and then when they convert that into protein, we can feed them to the animals, and the compost we can use them to fertilize the garden and the plants to grow the food. So it's like a circular economy kind of approach again. And honestly, we started off with just wanting to grow food because that's what we want to do, but we realized that as a farm you could develop and as an urban farm in a city, right, you can increase the quality of life. Although it's a first world city, you can increase the purpose of someone's life just by having an urban farm there. And that's how we developed that idea out of growing food. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much. Невероятно интересно.
It is extremely interesting, and I do hope that every one of you gets a chance to go to Singapore. I think we all visited Berlin, Vienna, but Singapore is a little bit remote, but they do have absolutely breathtaking projects. So I would like to thank all of our speakers. Thank you very much. I think that maybe we have one question from the audience, but we only have enough time for one question. I'm sorry about that. But I believe that the most important message that we heard today, all of the projects that we learned about, well, basically they mean that we ourselves are changing. We're becoming different. We are becoming more conscious, more aware, and I think that this word is extremely important in cultural, social, and political context. Let's be conscious, let's be aware, let's understand that we are not isolated, we do not live in a vacuum, we don't have a spare planet that we're going to move to once we deplete the resources here. So I would like to thank everybody for that. So if there is a question, we only have time for one question. Wonderful. I have a question to Daria. How do you attract investment to your project? Did you use your own money? Well, yeah, I started using my own personal money, and it's a social project. We also receive subsidies, grants, and support from companies and corporations. So Unilever or UniCredit, for instance, organized competitions when they were looking for entrepreneurs who are doing something interesting or environmentally friendly or something for community. So we competed there, for instance, with a chain of hairdressing salons for kids. So there were different projects there. Once we registered ourselves as an NGO, our social work attracts subsidies, grants. We take part in international programs. So we got accredited for the Tommy Hilfiger Accelerator in Amsterdam. So we're going to attend INSEAD training courses in September. So that is also a very important form of support. I attended the business school in Skolkovo. That was a grant from Unilever. So once we needed the investments into our business, we started talking to different investors, and as a result, there were people who knew us before, but they somehow just didn't see any potential in our business because we said that the profits are transferred to charity, and we didn't think that that would attract a lot of potential partners, but then I sold part of the business and attracted some investments. So it wasn't a cash out, there was reinvestment into business. So now I have 3 more partners. I would like to point out that everything that we are hearing about today, all of these projects are basically they exist more or less independently and not fully integrated with the government. Well, we do want a bit more integration with the funding, but nonetheless, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your attention. I would like to thank everybody, so I hope we'll meet again soon.